Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome into our virtual Indigenous hockey and hockey one-on-one conversation presented by the Seattle Kraken and Muckleshoot. My name is Everett Fitzhugh from the Seattle Kraken, and joining me today is DJ Aluk from the Big Stone Cree Nation. DJ, thank you so much for joining us here today and really helping us to have this important conversation.
Thanks, Everett, for having me. I want to give a good thanks to Muckleshoot people and hosting us in their territory.
Awesome opportunity for us to really bring this game of hockey to people. And again, it's such a unique game. We're going to get into all of that today about how you got into the game of hockey, about how hockey has impacted and really helped grow in the Indigenous and Native community. And then we're going to give a little bit of a hockey 101. But before we get to all that, we want to remind everybody to drop their names into the live chat. Feel free to comment. Feel free to post some questions as well. You'll take home a free Seattle Kraken beanie as well for doing that. So please be sure, interact with us. We are so happy that you are here joining us today. And DJ, let's dive right into our conversation because you and I have been talking over the past couple of weeks about your story and about how you've been involved and how you got involved with the game of hockey. So take us back to the formative years of DJ, back when you were a little tyke skating around on the rinks of Northern Alberta. What got you into the game, and what are some of the things that you find so interesting about this game of hockey?
Yeah, I was raised by my grandparents early on, so I learned to fall in love with the sport at a young age, and having my mushroom, my grandfather, take me to the rink, was a big thing for me back then, and so as I was playing and learning the game, I had this huge passion and love for it. So and then it evolved into me coaching my brother as a teenager going to high school. Getting up at 5 a.m. on Saturdays and Sundays to take him to the rink for 6 o'clock practices, and things like that. So I did that for 3 years, and then I, furthered my skills and my, my knowledge by, going to college and learning, how the body moves and trying to understand the science behind it. And so, I understood, again, movement and sport. And so, I continued to coach as I was going to school and furthered, and then from there it evolved into, me then giving back to, Native communities and teams. So I had a fortunate honor to coach at the Natural Aboriginal Championships, taking young, 15, 16, 17-year-old gentlemen, to the national tournament. So that was a really great experience. Really enjoyed that. Especially in 2015. The group we had there was a lot of fun. What we constructed and put together. Having young representations throughout the province that could have a good experience to take away from that tournament and give back to their community. And so there was that, and then it, now it's evolved to, then I moved here.
Yeah.
My wife moved us here, and she asked me the first year, so what do you think about living here? And I'm like, it's just missing hockey. Other than that, it'd be perfect, And then a couple of years later, the Kraken get announced. So, that's worked out pretty good, now I've dived back into hockey here, and, my daughter has the same passion and love for the sport as I do. So I've started creating, a culture and a community around her and for her growth and development for the sport. So that's kind of where I am today.
And I think it's so important too, because a lot of people talk about teaching and community, and especially from the grassroots level. Football is huge from a youth level in places like Texas and Ohio, and kids play soccer from an early age. But trying to get kids involved in hockey is massive. And I think for you to be able to coach and help bring up that next generation, how rewarding is that for you to see these kids on the ice taking the lessons that you've been teaching them, that you've learned growing up, and now seeing them kind of run off and do the same?
Yeah, I mean, just creating good habits, right?
Yeah.
So, using hockey as a vehicle to create those good habits, or sport in general, right? That's can they drive their own bus?
Mhm.
As you fill up that bus, can you, give them enough tools and skill sets and know-hows to eventually drive that? And so that way, when they, grow up, become, leave the nest, so to speak, and begin their journey as adults, their bus is full. Okay, so
For you as a player or as a coach or maybe even as a parent, seeing your daughter now learning the game of hockey, which by the way, I saw some excellent video of his daughter playing hockey, and she could probably, make a lot of older kids look foolish. But what have been some of your more fond memories of the game of hockey from your time involved with this sport?
well, just the relationships you develop, the friendships, things like that, but also the dedication to get better, to be the best version of you, becomes a huge time investment, and but also the process of that becomes really fun to learn more about yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So again, trying to understand who you are as a person through the sport.
You mentioned seeing that growth and being able to teach and being able to coach. And I want to ask you what your favorite part of the game of hockey is. Would it be safe to say it is that coaching, or is there something else that you really enjoy about the game of hockey?
Well, it depends on which age group I'm dealing with.
Okay.
Right. And so when you're dealing with 10 and under, 12 and under, I mean, it's like as soon as lights go off in their little minds about learning a new skill, that excitement, that's like, as a coach, that's where you feed off that, right? So that sense of accomplishment, and especially hockey, where there's this tendency to be too scared to fall, even though they have all this padding.
Yeah.
I'll be like, going like this. I'm like, what is that? They're like, what? I mean, isn't that padding, right? And they're like, yeah. Well, use it. It's okay to fall. It's okay to, and that falling is part of the process of learning. And so they need to, be embracing it, right? And be okay that falling is part of it.
Now, again, you mentioned falling, and I remember when I learned how to skate, I was 22 years old. And the first thing that my skating instructor taught me was how to fall properly. And it has to be, equal parts adorable, equal parts maybe a little bit frustrating, seeing those kids, trying to learn the game. But like we've said, that's what it's all about. Getting our communities, and especially in historically underrepresented communities, the Native community, the Black community, whatever the community may be, getting them involved in the game. And it all starts right there with those basics.
Absolutely, it does. And, I think how you approach it becomes vital in the process of it. And so, if, just being open-minded and just, going with it, and, not having your expectations too high, right? So, I think, it's definitely not the most natural movement, right? So that becomes challenging, trying to move from point A to point B, and then point C becomes, somewhat of frustration for many. But again, them learning like their outside edge, for example, so they can turn and cross over and be more of a dynamic skater, that's where you really get to see them, fall into the sport.
This is our virtual Indigenous hockey history and hockey 101 conversation. Everett Fitzhugh alongside with DJ. A look, and DJ, I want to switch gears now.
Today is an exciting
of the game of hockey within the Indigenous community, because a lot of what we see in the NHL right now, a lot of the rules, a lot of the gameplay was inspired by the early games of Aboriginal tribes playing on ice, playing a very early game of hockey.
Yeah, I mean, right, and we have a lot of thanks to give to the Mi'kmaq people in the east coast of Canada, and they were the first manufacturers of the first hockey stick, and as well, and so that supplied into the NHL and around the the coast to coast of these lands. So, and diving into that is learning, like, the sport is deep within their culture, deep within their language, and we're oral. We share our knowledge through storytelling, and so there's a oral history there amongst the Mi'kmaq people.
Yeah.
And so it's really neat, how the stick itself was created, and from a root, the blade here. So here's a stick, and it was a one-piece stick where the blade itself was actually the root of the tree, and then it was just and the shaft was part of the tree, and so that was the stick, and again, the stick here means way more to me than it would another person, and the reason for that is, because the game was founded on raw material, the surface itself was water, frozen water, and because water in our culture is very pure and very, very means a lot, and so guaranteed there was a lot of ceremonies happening before we would play, and so now you get to see a lot of our travel teams will start doing more ceremony before they enter the ice. They'll do more smudging and things like that. And so, again, going back to, 100, 200, 300 years ago, when our people used to play this game.
Yeah.
So there's that connection. And so, this stick here, like I said, it means a lot. Like it's part of Mother Earth, right? So, the feel, and then you think of the sensory neurons within your palm, and it's kind of like a nutrition, really. Yeah. You're feeding the body inside. And so, then this tool becomes, part of your creativity, right? It's an extension of yourself. So when you're controlling the puck or the ball, right, that's an expression of who you are as a player. And again, you got to have that feel, that connection to Mother Earth. And so that's where, the stick comes from. And, so that's a little bit of history on there. And, something that isn't really talked about or thought about. And, I think a lot of people just take this stick and don't really give it much meaning or much thought. And so, but really, I think within the native culture, it like I said, the stick means way more.
We were talking last week, and hearing you say those things, I don't think I've met someone who's spoken about the game with such reverence and with such passion before. And for you as a coach, and for other Indigenous coaches and people who are trying to teach the game to their respective tribes and their respective communities, how important is it for those lessons to be rooted within nature, telling the history and the stories of how their game came to be, and then adding that, I guess, personality, adding that culture to their side of the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think educating, the hockey world, what the stick really means to us. Yeah. And what wood means to us, what raw materials mean to us, what the water, I think, again, you're skating on, something we drink, right? And the purity of that material, or of that body of water that is part of Mother Earth. That all really, I think, is taken for granted. Just jump on the ice, they grab their stick, just no thought. And I think if players understood the deeper meaning behind it, I think they would, perform better, even, right? They'll express themselves more because of that spiritual element that they're, diving in. I mean, if you look at a player, you think of some of the NHL players, they all are equal in skill. Yeah. Right? But you look at a Crosby, for example, he plays with a deep meaning and spirit. He's more consistent. And so, it's that spirit element in the sense of, I guess your why, or your why you're willing to put in the energy and effort into each shift, and consistently.
You mentioned the NHL, and I think that's a great segue into the members of the Native community who have made their mark in the National Hockey League. You've got players today in Carey Price and TJ Oshie who are playing. You've got guys like Jordan Tutu. Of course, you've got Fred Saskamoose from back in the day when he played the NHL. So many great players have come from Indigenous communities. And for you, how does it feel to see that representation? And especially recently, we've talked a lot about how representation, especially in the game of hockey, how much that matters. And I think it has to be really nice to see a lot of those Indigenous communities and figures playing in the NHL.
Yeah, it's huge because hockey, especially in north of the border, it becomes such a huge part of the community.
It's life, yeah.
It's life, yeah. And so it is so huge, you think of, some of these players they all look up to, whether it's Ethan Bear or Carey Price or, and again, they're wearing their jerseys as well, right? And their numbers and, watching them and learning from them, right? So, yeah, it definitely helps, right? Encourage them to continue on and battle through. It's role models, right? And that's what we need, and we need more.
And even if they're not in the National Hockey League, there still have been quite a few role models, be it females in the game, coaches in the game who have still left their mark as well.
Absolutely, yes. They give back, right, to the community and, from a coaching perspective, and again, continuously build that community or that tribe.
Yep.
And so, that's vital, right? It doesn't just stop from when you play. They continue, bringing the young people underneath their wing.
The National Hockey League has returned to Seattle, and last July, the NHL Seattle officially became the Seattle Kraken. We've got a little video to show you just exactly how that process came to be.
Today is an exciting day for the National Hockey League. Seattle, the NHL is thrilled to welcome you.
We are proud to give you the Seattle Kraken.
I've always enjoyed watching that video and just seeing how the NHL came to be here in Seattle. A lot of people may not know, but the Seattle Metropolitans back in the early 1900s became the very first American-based hockey team to win the Stanley Cup. And now the Kraken are here in Seattle, and we have an opportunity to do that once again. Everett Fitzhugh from the Seattle Kraken, along with DJ Aluk. And DJ, you mentioned your daughter and the relationship that you have with her and watching her grow and learn the game of hockey. As someone who grew up in Alberta, and like myself up until now, was an Edmonton Oilers fan. We can talk about the old Oilers days once we get off here. But how is it when you heard that the NHL was returning to Seattle, you now have an opportunity to show your daughter the highest level of hockey in the world?
Yeah, I mean, that's huge. I used to always tell my athletes that I used to coach and work with, it's important to always watch at least one game a week, to learn from the best.
Yeah.
And, and depict different elements that they can take away and apply to their everyday, training. And so to have a team like that here in your background becomes vital, right? and especially when you're up close, you really get appreciation for the speed, the skill, and again, like, my whole approach is breaking the sport down into pieces and bringing it all together. And so when you're doing that and you see these players playing with this, fast, hard, and with a lot of resistance coming from different directions, man, you really get appreciation for it. So, and again, there's a difference between, the bottom 10 rows and the top, right? You don't really get that same feel. But yeah, the size, the speed, all that is really neat.
That's one thing I don't think people really understand about the game of hockey. And I remember a quote from Brendan Shanahan a few years ago, and someone asked him, he said, a few years ago, about 15 years ago, and somebody asked him, is hockey the most difficult game to play? And he said, well, you tell me, you're 6'3", 6'4" guys on a quarter of an inch steel blades, you're chasing a puck, you're getting hit, and just all of those skills and all of those different skill sets that you have to be able to harness just in order to play the game at a basic level. I mean, that's pretty intense.
It is, absolutely. And so my approach is breaking it down, especially at these young ages, and having the young people learning it in pieces, right? So you have your stick here, right? And so, learning this tool, like I said earlier, where your creativity, and you got to understand the hand positioning, right? The roles of the hands. Here's your top hand, it controls the stick. Here's your bottom hand, and it's basically it's there for support, right? I call it the quiet animal. And it's quiet because it's just gliding away and supporting the top hand. But it comes to life when you're looking for that big slap shot or that big shot. That's where you're getting that power. And that's where it just roars at you, right? Because what you're doing is you're pulling with the top hand and pushing, and that's where you get that big flex. But really, that's that instant of this hand just coming to life. Other than that, it's just there, just sliding up and down. And so as you learn the different elements of the blade, right? The dynamic blade. So you got to learn the front face, the back face, the toe edge, the heel edge, and as your top hand controls those different elements of the blade, that's where your creativity comes to life.
Hockey is a very creative game, and some basic 101 for hockey. You've got 5 players on the ice. You've got your 3 forward lines. Your 3 forwards rather. You've got 2 defensemen, and then you have a goalie. So 6 players total on the ice, but each position group means something. You've got your 4 lines. Your top 2 lines are your scoring lines. Your bottom 2 lines are your hitting and your energy lines. You've got your defensemen. You've got your goalies. All of them bring different skill sets, bring different things to a team, ultimately with the same goal, which of course is not only winning, but also learning and growing together.
Absolutely. And we talked about a little bit on the different roles within a team, and it's important that you learn what your role is eventually. I mean, not at young ages, but eventually you need to understand what your contribution to the team is. And so that's 100%. It's there's different roles within the team and different skill sets.
Now, one of the biggest things that I've always been fascinated about the game of hockey, and even someone like myself who I've played 1 game of men's league my whole life, I won 7 faceoffs, so that is the proudest moment of my hockey career, but is the equipment. I can skate halfway decently, but you put hockey gear on me and I'm like Bambi, just kind of on the ice, floating around out there. But the equipment is interesting too, because you have all the pads, you have the gloves, you have skates. If you're a goalie, you're wearing 20 pounds, 30 pounds of extra gear just to have that added protection. So just take us through that part of the game and how that equipment has really impacted and evolved over time.
It has, and I mean, like I said earlier, where some kids need to even learn how to use it. Right? In the sense of hit a fall. I used to call falling an art before parkour came along, right? Like there is an art to falling, and you got to learn it on the ice. And so that way, when you do get tripped or get whatever, you can react and you feel comfortable in that process. So putting it to use, and when you're battling stick on stick or stick on puck, you're going to rub shoulders with your opponent, and you're competing for that space.
Yep.
You're competing for that space directly behind the ball or the puck, and that's the contact, right? It's not the big hit. I mean, that's not the purity of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Purity is the sheer angling, stick on stick, stick on puck, shoulders on shoulders, rubbing, competing and battling for that space.
We've got some time left, and I think what I want to talk about next is probably the most important piece of this conversation. How can people get involved with the game of hockey? There are many different things you can do, many different ways that you can get involved, but what are some things that folks can do to become hockey fans, hockey players, general hockey knowledgeable people? What are some of those things?
I mean, whether it's helping out at a local rink, getting involved with try hockey, right? And again, whether it's helping out in the sense of bringing an individual or two or yourself and learning the sport. I think it starts there. Or I take it a step further. I just buy a stick. Right. You can learn the game just by having a stick in your hand and learning how to angle it, how to position it, how to put your body in the right position so you can control a puck or a ball. And from there, then taking the proper steps onto the ice, right? And like I did with my daughter, I didn't put a stick in her hand until after the first year of her learning.
Oh, really?
And the reason for that was, I wanted her, again, like I said before, I took a process of breaking it down and learning, when you're on the ice, learn your skates, learn your edges, right? As soon as I put a stick in her hand, then it becomes more about the stick and the puck or the ball, and less about the skating. So, once I did that, I also didn't cut her stick.
Okay.
I just gave it to her, and to me, it didn't matter so much how much control she had of the puck. What mattered to me as she evolved with her skating is that she was in a proper hockey stance or athletic stance, right? And a lot of times what people will do is they'll cut the stick short right off the bat, and and all of a sudden the kids are like this. Okay? So it teaches them bad habit. And I've been fortunate to work with the sport of ringette, and it's big in Canada and in Finland. It's not obviously big in the US or played, but with ringette players, they just have a shaft, right? They don't have no blade, and they have a ring. And so what they do is they just poke their end of their stick into the ring, and they are able to control it. Keep their head up, good body positioning. So after watching this and watching their, how solid ringette skaters were relative to hockey players, that's where it gave me the idea of I'm not cutting her stick. Like, she's going to start. It matters more to me and her keeping her body at, in proper position. And so people would be like, DJ, when are you going to cut that stick of hers? She's not ready.
She's not ready.
She's not ready. And then as her body started to get in better position, then I started cutting her stick slowly.
Okay.
So that was a process. That didn't happen. That was probably a good almost a year, 6 months to a year before, what people would be, what a regular height of a stick, which is between nose and below their chin, depending on the individual. That took about a year before I got her to that. And then, again, we would spend a week or we'd spend a session off ice just learning the stick. We'd spend a session on ice learning the edges. And then we'd spend a session, once she got to that point, putting it all together, and she would do a session where she would, with stick and skates.
Hockey can be a very cost prohibitive sport as well. And it's not so much that you need to go out and right away, day one, buy a stick, buy skates, things like that. It can be as simple as what I did when I was a kid. I got a broomstick and a tennis ball in my kitchen and was trying to stick handle. So don't let the price tag, the potential price tag of hockey fool you. There are some things that you can do to become familiar with the game without having to go buy the official equipment. It's all about just getting familiar with the game.
Absolutely. It's, you can just watch it, right? And so much on with the whole technology and YouTube and things like that you can just learn from just watching. And then kind of, once you do get the chance or the experience to jump on the ice or in a parking lot with a stick in your hand, and in Canada we just jump on the street. So that absolutely.
So we're going to wrap things up here in a little bit, but DJ, first of all, thank you so much for joining us here today and for taking the time to, again, really have this important conversation. And before we go, I just want you to share any last words or thoughts or comments that you may have.
Yeah, I just want to thank Muckleshoot and the Kraken for having me here and part of this. It's been great. I appreciate it.
And thank you, everyone out there, for joining us as well. Before we go, we'll throw that infographic that you just saw back up on the screen of ways to get involved with hockey. Of course, this is a game that we all love and that we all want to bring to this community. The Seattle Kraken are very determined and committed to bringing the game of hockey to everyone within the PNW, within different communities, not just Seattle. So thank you, everyone, so much for joining us here today. DJ, thank you so much. My name is Everett Fitzhugh from the Seattle Kraken. Thank you so much to Muckleshoot as well for helping us put on this wonderful Q&A. We thank you, everyone. We'll talk to you next time.